Yo, family, how you doing? Good evening, good evening, good evening. I want to give a shout out to my brother Taureen Rage. Taureen Rage. I'm loving his videos, man. Loving his videos. And he was talking recently about the Asian reliance of the or on the black community to make its money. And he transitioned from talking about that to talking about black people and our spending power. And I want to talk quickly with you about this, especially as we're thinking more and more about reparations. Because as black folks, we have been told a lot of things about ourselves. And a lot of these things have been negative. One of the things that we have been constantly told, and I don't care how far back you go, we have been told that black people cannot work together. It's a lie. Now, I've made videos talking about this where I have pointed out that we were not able to come together all together to fight slavery, and that uh, that inability has crippled us. However, there has been there has been times since even when we were enslaved and beyond where we did come together and we made incredible strides in unifying with small and somewhat larger groups of black people. We forget that after slavery ended, black people just didn't mope around. Black people went to work. We wore the skilled tradesmen and women, excuse me, family. We wore the skilled tradesmen and women in this country. We had the majority of the skill set that obviously 300 years of enslavement would merit us. We had always been expected to be skilled, even though they try to make it out to be just that we were a bunch of machines who picked plants and cotton and things like that. We did far more than that. Far more than that. And, I like to bring up Dr. King a lot of times because who the media tells you Dr. King is and who he actually is two very different things. Dr. King, in a speech that was just uncovered here a couple of years ago and released for the public to consume, called Some of Our Discontent, he talks briefly about the fact that black people, Negroes obviously is what he called us, we built the structures in the South. We built the structures in the South. We built so many structures in the South that you, and this is my own explanation of it, there was not a road or a bridge that you could touch in the South that our hands hadn't been on. We built a lot of things in the South. And when we became free, and just to clarify, I got to make sure to impress upon you the importance of this family. We weren't just craftsmen and women. We were farmers, yes, but did you know? Did you know we were also we helped to build ships? We were navigators on those ships. We were captains on those ships. We were mechanics on those ships. We helped to dig out ports. We helped to design ports. We helped to design um, uh, cities and towns. And then we cleared the way to make it possible to build those cities and towns. Do you know that? Do you know? I mean, I was watching a piece, and I'll get back to my original. Well, I was watching this piece years ago on the History Channel. They used to have these shows come on early in the morning, and they were geared towards school children, and they expected teachers to record them and then play them in their classrooms, so they wouldn't put any commercials in them. And during Black History Month, and sometimes during June, I suppose for Juneteenth, they would play these incredible Black educational films. And one of the films, it talked about um, the labor. the labor that black people actually contributed to the country. And, the professors, many of them black, talked about how black folks would clear. I mean, I didn't even realize this. This blew my mind because I knew we worked hard. But you know how we see those pictures of those southern plantations, those large southern plantations, and it would just be one plantation after another, after another, after another. It'd be this sprawling plantation. First and foremost, they got the idea to do those plantations from the feudalist structures, the feudalist land structures of Europe. That's one. I didn't learn that from them. I learned that from a book. But two, black people would actually build those plantations. Now, many of you may have known that, but many of you probably don't understand the significance of that. Black people in Mississippi and Alabama and those southern states there, you're talking about hot weather year round. That means you had incredibly old growth forests there, meaning you had forests that had been there for thousands of years. You had incredibly large trees that were hardwood that you had to not only chop down, but then you had to root up. You had to dig down and root them up. And then you had swamps filled with alligators and crocodiles and the like. You had just thickets of bamboo and all this other stuff that they had to work through and push through day after day to clear miles of land to enable those plantations to be built. I mean, and we kind of got a glimpse of this in 12 Years a Slave. When black people were freed, we built communities immediately. And the question that we never ask, because we aren't really shown that Reconstruction, we are taught that Reconstruction basically was us sitting around waiting for white people to come and save us again. I think it was W.E.B. Du Bois who blew that up. But because some of us do understand that we built communities after we were freed from slavery. But what we don't ask is, how did we know how to build those communities? How do we know? Now, obviously, we kept many traditions alive through our enslavement and our captivity. We kept many of our traditions alive through song and dance, which we would do in the brush when master was sleeping away the night after not doing any work. I mean, think about that. They were the most tired and they ain't done nothing. They didn't do anything. And just to point out, a lot of currently we're having this reparations conversation. And a lot of people say, well, we didn't participate in slavery, but you did participate in racism. And many of you, if you had the opportunity, if it was still legal to have slaves, many of your great grandparents who were here dreamed of having slaves because that was the American dream back then. I just had to point that out. So we don't ask the question, how did we know how to build those communities? It's because we had already done that. We were the skilled people who did it. We were the skilled people who did it. That's how we knew how to build communities. We had already built up communities for white folks. We knew how to build communities, so we built communities. Now, the ancestors are funny because we have been told for the last 100+ years that black people can't get together and do anything, even though white people have been destroying our communities continuously for the last, 150+ years. We have a community, they burn it down, they destroy it, whether north or south or west. They don't care. But we've been told this to stop us from actually doing it. They have planted informants and agent provocateurs in our community to ensure that we stay separated. We don't understand COINTEL programs, which was an anti-insurgency. This is something that I learned from listening to people like Bobby Seale. COINTELPRO was an anti-insurgency. Yeah, you remember that word, insurgency, from Iraq. Yeah, they literally activated an anti-insurgency campaign, a military campaign on the black community to stop us from coming together. Why? Why? The ancestors, family, the ancestors. At one point, we had all the power in this country. If we could get ourselves together, put ourselves together, we could have built a nation without even thinking about it, easily. The problem was, we were still holding on. We as black people, we were still holding on old mindsets from Africa that should have evaporated. We were still looking at each other, and we still do it today, on a caste level. This is why we could have people talking about the talented 10th and think that it didn't come from Africa, but it came from Europeans. No, it was something that existed in Africa too. We were looking at each other through the lens of, these people are better and these people aren't. And we still have that problem today. However, after World War II, something began to happen. Black people went all across the world to fight fascism and to protect democracy, supposedly. And when they returned home to America, what they found was the Nazis that they had helped to defeat now wore Klan robes. Former military personnel who wished and hoped and prayed that the Tuskegee Airmen would come and either rescue them or escort them, because they never lost a plane that they were escorting, turned into rabid racists overnight. And black people started having a serious conversation. Now, this isn't in many of your books, but black people started having a serious conversation. And that conversation was simply, do we really need to be a part of this damn country? Now, family, understand, at that time, we had the know-how, we had the knowledge to run communities. Not all of us, but some of us. And the problem wasn't that the conversation was happening at the higher levels of the black community, because it wasn't really happening at the highest level of the black community, because the highest level of the black community, most of them were indoctrinated by whiteness and wanted to be as close to white as they could be. No, the problem was that this conversation was happening not only at the bottom of the black community, but at the middle of the black community. And as we seen our communities become more and more devastated, as white communities started being built up and they started plowing through our communities, the conversation grew louder and louder and louder. And thus we got COINTELPRO. Because despite what this country tells you, family, if it wasn't for us, if it wasn't for what we contributed economically to this country and what we contribute culturally to this country, and that's the biggest important part of it, what we contribute culturally to this country would be done. Done. The biggest fear is that we will come together and we will unify ourselves. That's the biggest fear. Not unify ourselves under Islam or under Christianity or even under Afrocentrism. No. The biggest fear is that we will unify ourselves under the color of blackness. That we will say Africanness is our nation. And that is it. Africanness is our nation. Now, we have demonstrated in the past that we could come together. And it is my belief that the ancestors, because we still held on to that negative mindset at the end of enslavement, that they allowed us to go back into enslavement to see if they could then break it away from us. Because we had everything that we needed to be free. And even when the Ku Klux Klan was riding against us, there was no reason why we couldn't take them on. There is no reason. Except for the fact that something was holding us back. And I think that something was that we didn't see each other equally. And we didn't see ourselves as having the ability to throw off these chains. Well, white people, because of that, I wonder sometimes if the ancestors allowed them to take what we had worked so hard to gain. I remember Phil Valentine's asking that question. How did the white man get everything that you have? When we were freed, supposedly from slavery, we were the country's craftsmen. We had every skill necessary to maintain and build this society. Within 50 years, the white man had more skills than us. 100 years, they had more skills than us. We still had skills, don't get me wrong. But if we had to build a community in 1955, 1970. If we had to build a community in 1970, we could still do it. But it would take us a lot longer than it did in 1868. Everything that we had, the white man got. Every skill. So that by the time 1990 came along, we had skills. But we didn't have functional skills. At least not as much as we did before. And even worse yet, we weren't that unified. The white man was given the opportunity to have full reign over this country. I do think part of it was to, make us come to the conclusion finally to see ourselves as equal and to lose that negative mindset. But I also think it was there to test Europeans because they had continuously said that they didn't need us. They had continuously said that we didn't matter, that they could build without us. They've had over 100 years to do that. They've had over 100 years to build this society. And look what they've done. And look what they've done. It's to the point, though, and this is the sad part, where we don't even remember that we have the ability, that we had, should I say, the ability to build communities. We don't even remember that we had the ability to dream. Because if you can dream it, man, you can achieve it. That we had the ability to dream of building not only a community, but a commonwealth. A commonwealth. And if you don't know what a commonwealth is, please look it up. Because we had that dream. Our great grandparents had that dream. That we would build a commonwealth that would be a lesson upon the world. As we are heading into the 2020s, the ancestors are trying to light that dream up again. They're trying to get us to see it. Because, family, I'm going to tell you something. The end of the social spectrum that I'm on, white people are abandoning. They're abandoning any responsibility for this country. And the funny thing is, many of them, not all, many of them are looking to us. Many of them are looking to us. Many of them are using us because they think if they have children with us, then that's going to save them. That ain't going to work. But many of them are looking to us. The question is, why are they looking to us? They're looking to us because 150 plus years ago, well over 150 years ago now, 170 years ago, we took care of this nation. We built this nation. And when I say we took care of this nation, family, we took care of this nation. Young children respected us more than they did their own parents. I've often thought about this. Many of the young children who grew up on the teat of Mammy and liked to listen to Uncle Ramus, they respected us more than they did their parents. We gave them more love and respect than their parents did. Now, I'm not saying that, many of them didn't grow up to be monsters, because they did. But I want you to really think about what that meant. We literally fed the first 3 or 4 generations of this country, to say nothing about what we gave to prior to this country being a country. But we raised this country. Our women breastfed this country. Our men taught the young lasses of this country. I mean, we raised this country. And I wonder sometimes if there's a psychological trauma that comes with really respecting and loving this person who is an object, but gave you more dignity and worth than your parents did. And then finding out one day that that person really didn't want to work for your parents because your parents kept them in captivity. I mean, there has to be something psychologically damaging that occurs, when that happens. And I wonder if some of the rabid conservatives you meet today, they are just reincarnated people who couldn't get over this fact that these people, although these black people, even though they loved them, it was still wrong to keep them in captivity, and they did not want to be in captivity. Because, I've read things where people who had slaves would try to justify it and say, they seem so happy and loving and respectful and yada, yada, yada. And then they tried to come to terms with how these people wanted to leave when they had the opportunity to be free. And they would sometimes resort to saying, oh, well, they were, lazy and shiftless and yada. After writing all this brilliant stuff about how they were nice and good and so, then suddenly they became lazy, shiftless and stuff because they left when they could be free. That is something psychologically damaging. And so I wonder if that's, partly what we're dealing with presently. I guess it doesn't matter. Ultimately, we as black folks, we have the ability to come together. And I think you're going to see this more and more and more. The one thing that is obvious, that is very obvious on YouTube, is you are seeing more black people posting videos about us coming together. You are seeing more black people posting videos about why we need to come together. And the times in the past when we have come together. In other words, I'm seeing more black people talk about why we need to come together. Now, the ancestors want to be clear about something. That, the next 10 years isn't going to be easy, family. We're going to have to pick our friends and our enemies very closely. And very carefully, should I say. Very carefully. But, there will be a contingent of people. And the Hopi talks about this, and it's a sad part of who we are. That will remain dead. But many more are going to wake up. And we have to be ready for that. Questions, comments, concerns, family, leave them below. I'll talk to you later. Peace.